And name me a movie that doesn't, kill off the exciting woman and make sure that everybody ends with a kiss.
Love is not real in the sense in which literature presents it, because that's not the purpose of literature.
Hollywood is probably responsible for the 43% of broken homes that exist in this country.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Art has been shaping our ideals. Amongst them, our ideals about love for centuries. If you cast your mind back to the troubadours in the Middle Ages, the strand of love poetry, which I was told to study as a student, in which his cruel mistress will eventually mutate into a Renaissance coy mistress. Or indeed into that now dead, beautiful vision of truth in the Romantic Age, with a stone angel forever unconsolably weeping, through to a rom-com. Insofar as art and culture has been shaping this ideal, this is what we've come to interrogate. Are we living an illusion created for us falsely by a culture which hopes to cocoon us from cradle to grave without ever protesting or contesting this? Or indeed, is this necessary? As Nietzsche at one point argued about aesthetic illusion, full stop, that life is not possible without it. And indeed, can we move forward to a more realistic conception, not only of our lives, but of love itself? So to discuss this weighty theme with me, if I might introduce them from my left to my right, Grisela Pollock, art historian, director of the Centre for Cultural Analysis at Leeds, Cultural Analysis, and also author of Visions and Difference. We have here Dennis Marks. He's a filmmaker, former head of BBC Music and of the English National Opera. And last but never, ever least, Godfrey Barker, here, my old mucker. He's a journalist, an art critic, and a broadcaster. He's, in fact, the arts consultant for on art markets for the BBC. Am I right?
Correct.
And independently, he does journalism in places like the Evening Standard. The format is that I'm going to ask each individual to discourse for 4 minutes, precisely 4 minutes, for the cameras, on that question. Is love real? And if I may begin with Godfrey, please.
In one of Trollope's novels, the Duke of Omnium learns that his children wish to marry for love. For 800 pages, he seeks to frustrate them. "What am I to say, sir?" asks his son, the Marquis of Silverbridge, in despair. "I love the girl better than my life. What is a man to do when he feels like that?" Lady Mary Palliser tells her father that she loves Frank Tregear, a man without rank or money, more than anyone else in the world. "Then you must conquer your love," the Duke replies. "It is disgraceful, and it must be conquered." But can it be? Love, W.H. Auden pointed out about Romeo and Juliet, is at its most powerful when it is most frustrated. But even at its most powerful, can love bear that burden that the 20th and 21st centuries have placed upon it, the burden of delivering the highest levels of human happiness? Even cultures most distrustful of love, countries like India, where arranged marriage is still prevalent, have succumbed in our times to the perfume of romance. Bollywood now outdoes Hollywood for rampant romantic passion. He felt as he looked at her that the only thing in the world worth living for was to have her for his own.
This is a philosophy session, so I'll start with philosophy and I'll end with art. And I'll begin with the usual semantic evasion, which is love real? Every word in that question needs defining, including the word is. Because the real question is, whose definition of love are we using? I rather hope we're not using Trollops, but let's go ahead. We'll do the usual. We'll go back to Plato. Plato regards love hierarchically, with sex at the bottom. Shall I rephrase that? It's a tough call to see love hierarchically. We've already had word of the troubadours, the world of the troubadours. In the Middle Ages, when the classical concepts of love were revived, love, in fact, had to fuse all three. It had to aspire from the carnal to the divine, and it also had to use the divine to conceal the carnal. And I think that's setting the bar far too high. Okay, so in the West we've had a variety of definitions of the word love, most of which conflict with each other. What about the word real? Well, who's it real for? Is it real for the subject, the lover, or is it real for the object, the beloved? If it's real for the subject, then by definition it's subjective. Erotic love is certainly subjective. It's susceptible to all kinds of things. It's subject to all kinds of things. It's subject to hormones, it's subject to mood, it's subject to the time of the month. Shakespeare has some fun with that, actually. Time of the month. He talks about the lunatic, the lover, and the poet in Midsummer Night's Dream, and he joins them together through imagination. He's, in a way, on the territory that we're about to be discussing, which is love created through the imagination. The potion in Midsummer Night's Dream is called Love in Idleness, which rather gives the game away. And just to reinforce the idea of susceptibility, of course, in Midsummer Night's Dream, when Titania gets the potion put on her eyes, who does she fall in love with? She falls in love with a donkey. So that's eros. What about philia? What about appreciation? That's even more subjective. I'm going to let me stick for a moment with heterosexual love, and let me stick with what the male regards as lovable in the female. It's incredibly susceptible to different cultures. The African ideal of beauty is associated with childbearing, hence broad-hipped Venuses in African sculptures. In the Renaissance, the beloved was slender and boyish, and that maybe goes back to the androgynous Greeks, whom they are trying to reborn, as it were. And then back to the 18th century, we are pneumatic. But one colour supplement regularly asks celebrities, have you ever said "I love you" and not meant it? They did do this in The Observer. And actually, or was it The Guardian on Saturday? Anyway, and actually, I've never found anybody to answer no. I just want to finish by saying that without the illusion of love, most of Mozart's operas, Shakespeare's plays, and Tolstoy's novels would collapse. If love were an absolute rather than a subjective, is that an answer to the question? No. But then, is love real? Really a question.
I have 155 things to say, so I'll say them very quickly. I want to pick up Shakespeare, I want to pick up Plato, okay, but I want to change the question, is love praxis? Is love what you do, not a state that afflicts you? And so I'm going to start with a Jewish rabbinic saying, which I've long found very interesting to ponder, and it goes like this: if love depends on some selfish cause, when the cause disappears, love disappears. But if love does not depend on a selfish cause, it will never disappear. Now, I'm going to think of two movies. One is I Hate Mrs. Doubtfire, okay, which is a film about love, because it appears to be about love, and it demonstrates the powerful love of a father for his children from whom he's excluded. But my discomfort comes from the fact that it represents the idea that if you get fed up with your husband because he's a bit tiresome, you just get another one, without understanding anything of the catastrophe that might afflict the network within which all of the parties to this particular relationship, including the husband, including the children. We all have the right to fall out of love and find ourselves so oppressed in a failed relationship that we have to exit from it. But it seemed in that film that love failed because the partner was no longer much fun. Okay? So let's have another one. And this is what Zygmunt Bauman, a leading sociological thinker, calls love in liquid times. Right? Liquid times, liquid modernity means simply you just move on. If it gets obsolete, try another one. And so this question of love isn't so much a question of reality, but the question of practice. But what I found interesting is that Mrs. Doubtfire, and this is my link with Plato, in order to show what love truly is, Robin Williams has to turn himself into an elderly and comfortable maternal type woman who can bring wisdom both to the children and to the others. And this links actually with the symposium, because when Socrates has to actually work out what love is, in he hauls some elderly philosopher, a woman called Diotima, who tells him, and this is where we can invert your thing about that eros isn't the drive that makes you say, in the quotations from Godfrey, I must have her, I want her, my life, I won't be complete without this person to fill me up with what it is I feel I lack. It is the point at which connections are made. The figure of eros connects the humans and the mortals, and it connects people to each other. So I want to put forward the idea of love as a form of experience, of connection. And it comes in two forms. One is to do with opening yourself up to the possibility that another can affect you. And secondly, I always say this to my children, that once you engage in a certain love relation with somebody, you become, in a sense, responsible for their soul. This is the sole reason why you should not be unfaithful, because if someone's opened themselves to you, you have something of them in your hands, and you are responsible. So I think love is something, not an illusion, fabricated by the various stories of literature or even of film, but something that you can actually live out. You can come to understand what it is as this question of ethically living a particular connection. And I want to finish with Romeo and Juliet, which is another film, Shakespeare in Love, I also hate very deeply, because it represents, it completely betrays what Shakespeare's play was so radical about, which was the possibility of these two young people not just escaping from an arranged marriage, but finding something of themselves as they became choosing subjects through the experience of being touched by the existence of another, not just any old other, but a prohibited other, an other for which there should be no connection. And the film Shakespeare in Love made wretched two actors have this, ludicrous relationship, and then made us complicit with watching this woman being sold into servitude to the hideous Colin Firth as, not Colin Firth, but as a wife beater. So I think she should have got another husband.
Thank you, Griselda. Now, I think before we come on to a discussion about how our cultures and our arts have fashioned, reformed, remolded, and changed love, how far we are responsible for making love in that sense, I just want to kind of explore this thing that has emerged between you, Griselda, most clearly, and you, Godfrey. That on the one hand, you describe very well love as actually a social relationship, not an imaginary, illusory thing, but something that binds individuals and societies, communities together. Whereas you say that this very relationship has emerged in the 20th century into the 21st as a very destructive power in our societies. How do the two of you understand each other across that axis?
Well, I neither said that, nor do I mean it.
Excuse me.
What I would say is that the birth of what we might shorthand as Hollywood romance lies in Victorian England and the Victorian poem in particular, and that along with the
Christina Rossetti.
and that, along with the novels of Trollope, is the seat of passion and besotted romance, as I would also have said, apropos, it lies in the most perfect novel ever written about love, Anna Karenina, which debates all the issues which I would otherwise raise about passion and besotted love.
Before I let Grisela come back on that, Dennis, can I turn to you? You've very much historicised love, and here's Godfrey saying it's them Victorians what is to blame. They have, as Plato might say about the poets, corrupted this very important social relationship. Do you understand what Godfrey's saying?
I do. I disagree with it. This morning, when I was chairing a similar panel, nobody disagreed with anybody. So I'm going to disagree. And first of all, I'm going to say that Anna Karenina is not about love. It's about adultery. That Anna Karenina, like all of Tolstoy's work, is essentially about the role of man in the larger world, the social world, and so on. And what drives Anna Karenina along is, if you like, love as breaking taboos. And my own feeling about the way in which this question is constructed is that love is not real in the sense in which literature presents it, because that's not the purpose of literature.
Grisela, do you have a line here? What I'm hearing is that kind of our fictions, our poetry, and perhaps our novels have corrupted or distorted a really important kind of social bond.
Yeah, I'm just saying specific films stage things and reveal. Going back to Godfrey's point, what I was going to say, which is I think we have to make a distinction between love and romance and the construction of romantic love. Okay, and obviously one of the corresponding dimensions, if we situate the invention of romantic love in a certain kind of literary trope in the 19th century or whatever, is, which I'm not quite sure what it is, but is also to bring in psychoanalysis, because with that kind of notion that is struggling to find itself and is being sort of romanticized in literature, psychoanalysis comes to provide a sense as to what teaches us to love. What are we doing when we love each other, right, in certain, let's say, erotic senses, or even what is the attachment? So we have to think of the parent-child love, the child-parent love, the possibilities of sibling love, the question of what Anna Freud called the war in the nursery, as under what circumstances do we have sufficient forms of love for others to actually live together to form even democratic subjectivity. So I think of love in a much bigger way than the notion of romantic love. And I wanted to throw in, this love for the world. I mean, what kind of love do you have to be politically engaged, which is the Hannah Arendt idea? Yes. Do we care?
But the ways that fictions have modelled love have changed over the years. And not only that potential criminalisation of Romeo and Juliet, but the pathologization of love as something sick or unhealthy or neurotic. Is this what you're saying the Victorians and their successors, Hollywood, have done for us in the contemporary construction of love?
Look, let's be terribly brief on this. The seat of all these problems, in England at any rate, lay in the literature and drama of the late 18th century. In the plays of Sheridan, in 1,000 magazines created for women, which led French doctors investigating the neurosis of love around Europe after Goethe's Werther concluded that no country in Europe was more gripped by the neurosis of love than England. Danger is what I'm staring at.
Do you buy this notion that sort of European literary cultures have distorted, focused, and captured our understanding of what love could be?
I think it differs from culture to culture. I think in France it changes a great deal after the French Revolution, as later in the Marasade play written in the 20th century about what happened in the 18th. What's the use of a revolution without copulation? I think that the crucial thing is that the concept of love will reflect the social values of the times. In that respect, I agree with you absolutely. But look at Mozart and Da Ponte. Mozart and Da Ponte actually precede Jane Austen by 20 years and come out of a very different kind of society. All of Mozart's Da Ponte, all three of Mozart's Da Ponte operas, Figaro, Don Giovanni, and Così fan tutte, all undermine in their different ways throughout their duration the concept of love. They are deconstructions of the concept of love.
And if I may submit it, deliberately do so.
Absolutely.
Because
I'm hearing a kind of version of European culture as the sort of controlling, historically original, controlling kind of wrong turn around our ideas of love. But as I reflect on my upbringing in this country, it's been popular music, and generally speaking, African-American music, with its sacred and profane love, very different ideas about what constitutes love that have really kind of focused the way I understand or think about love. What would you say in this kind of conflict of different understandings of the cultural influences on us?
Obviously, from certain kinds of points of view, the analysis of what the Hollywood movie, let's say, takes up that tradition is, I mean, and it goes back to the 19th century, these are structural organizations of kinship. So in traditional societies, okay, you have to make sure who has sex with whom, because it's going to be a passage for all sorts of stuff. And it's on the outside, so you don't let X marry Y, you tell who X is going to marry Y, okay. When you don't have that external sort of, is it an exoskeleton sort of things, etc., you turn it into something which people have to do themselves. Right? And so we have a whole apparatus called the cinema, which is to remind us that the one single thing you must do is to form a couple. And name me a movie that doesn't, kill off the exciting woman and make sure that everybody ends with a kiss. The famous, what it called? I can't even remember the name of the film, but anyway, the Lauren Bacall and Humphrey Bogart. I mean,
Casablanca.
No, not that's The Big Heat. Is it The Big Heat? No, what am I talking about?
Big Sleep.
The Big Sleep,
Big
that's
Sleep.
right. Okay, this is the classic way we teach students. You go through everything, you work it all out. Who cares who got killed? Who cares? So long as we have a clinch, okay? Now that is directing us to understand that everything will be fine if you make a couple. And what I'm saying is everything that's important about love happens after you make that choice. That is never part of the story. The long process, I've now been married for 35 years. I didn't want to get married. I was a feminist who said, no, don't even take me there, nothing. But I'm very fascinated by what, through the highs and lows, two of us have managed to produce in each other as an exercise of daily life, a daily act.
Between those versions of love made available to us, which as young children looking at Lauren Bacall and Humphrey Bogart, or seeing a sort of fairy tale princess being sort of sold on ITV, can I afford that? Between these images of love constructed for us and our own experiences and choices in our lives, was there, for you, Dennis, a large gap? Did you feel free to model your own personal experience of love, or were the expectations, the ideological framing of love, was that too big, too vast, too expected of you?
It's many questions, because this happens at many times in many lives. What I thought about love when I was 15 or 16, what I thought about love when I was 30, what I thought about love when I was 50, and what I think about love now are completely different things. I've been married twice. My concept of love in both marriages was completely different, if I'm being confessional about it. It was relative to my state and my partner's state at that particular time, which is why I said that my attitude towards love is essentially relativistic.
Grisela.
I suppose, I mean, it does mean something different to pose that question to someone who was going to grow up to be a woman, because the nature of what was, it was to be loved, right? To find someone to find me lovable, as opposed to, in a sense, to be in a position to be the subject of love. So I think there is a struggle to understand what it is that literature written by women about what is the nature of the experience of either erotic love or attachment, or a sense of, as I'm saying, this notion of love for the world. I mean, an engagement with it as a subject, that I still think is to be written. The films are still to be made. And I think I made the point in my briefing notes about debates people had about the piano, the films by Jane Campion. I mean, what does it mean to have new films made which actually try to expand and reorientate different sets of questions around this? So, I mean, I grew up in Canada, where love was very organized. At 12 you started to go out. At 13 you could do certain things. At 14, there was a kind of managed process of both developing how to have a relationship and how to manage the sex that went with it in such a way that you didn't do it at 12. That was the main plot. And then I came to England and I was 15 and thought, God, they haven't a clue here. I don't know. It's just a completely different culture. So I think I kind of fell out of understanding this. But I think I want to go back to your popular music, because that is interesting. Why is this the endless thematic? Is it the adolescent love? I mean, is the adolescent the key, going back to the Romeo and Juliet, are the adolescents the site of an experience of the afflicted love? Whereas, as Dennis is saying, as you get older, through different kinds of experiences of relationships, it becomes, are you calling it relative, more specific, more subject-specific, with some kind of sense of self-knowledge and other knowledge. But popular music does make it I mean, all these unhappy men, all the time,
Unhappy women.
Well, I'll quote back a line from the movie Notting Hill, where a girl says, he married Marlene Dietrich and he woke up and found me. So if you ask me what was my personal experience, I, like millions, married a woman I idealized. And eventually, as in every marriage, the idealized person turned out to be a real one. There then arose the question central to the Victorian novel: does fidelity to that real person matter more than passion, following romantic love wherever it may lead you? I, for 29 years, decided, perhaps like Grisela with her 35, that fidelity did matter a great deal, most of all for the sake of my children. Now I am divorced. Do I still believe in passion? Yes, I do, in the sense that everybody deserves some blue sky in their lives in the middle of the grey. But if you choose to enter the crazy world of passion, you must always remember that it differentiates from the real world, or you're heading for all sorts of trouble. That is the theme Hollywood goes nowhere near staring at in the 21st century. This is why I believe that Hollywood misleads millions, that Hollywood is probably responsible for the 43% of broken homes that exist in this country. People who married each other besotted and idealizing entered a power struggle when the idealized person became a real person, and the result is disaster. We need to be more open-eyed about what is real and enduring love.
Good. Well, in this kind of final part of our discussion, having touched on sort of various forms of opera, various forms of novel, 19th century Russian and otherwise, and indeed the Grimm's fairy tale inheritance or not of American cinema and the music
I don't think
of
the
African
Grimm's.
America.
Shtetl culture wasn't Grimm's.
All of these are either competent or incompetent narratives that enable us to engage with our lives and tell us something like what our choices and potential outcomes and what potential dangers are. I want to move us into something like some future vision. Do you think that, Godfrey, may I begin with you, that we need to do without these kinds of stories altogether to face the reality of our lives and our social relationships? Or can you see some still continuing role for something like the love story?
We all have to have those stories. We have, as I say, to have blue sky in the middle of our grey skies. What's important is not to mistake that blue sky for utopia. So much the loudest moan in current pop music is my utopian vision of that lady is shattered. There's where the danger lies. The answer for the future, as you put it, is with 43% of marriages ending in divorce in this country. There has to be a much more intelligent love in the United Kingdom than there is at the moment. And it begins with getting away from the unreal visions of love that are posed in the cinema and in the hopelessness of certain pop lyrics, and understanding that the security of the future is to look the person you marry in the face and see the real person and accept that and not dream of a hopeless utopia that is bound to end in unfulfillment.
Dennis, can I come to you? Have you ever in your life considered a life without love? And what does it look like?
Can I not answer your question, but just bring up, I will in a moment, but I bring up something else. It just occurred to me that here we are talking, Godfrey is talking about the illusion of romantic love peddled by the mass media that has deluded us. And I was just thinking about what's been happening for the last 3 or 4 days in this country and in France, in which the Conservative Party is tearing itself apart because of the romantic illusion of Hollywood movies, or whatever as you describe it, being taken from the heterosexual world into the homosexual world. And those pictures that I saw on television yesterday of these two French people, one 10 years apart in age, having a romantic wedding straight out of a Hollywood movie, but they were both men. And I think, actually, we are not at the end of something, we're at the beginning of something. So that's not answering your question.
No, that's answering it kind of very fully, very provocatively. Can I pass on to you, Grisela?
I still think we're confusing, passion, romance with love. And I still think we need a little bit of more understanding of what psychoanalysis has taught us, which is where do we first learn any of these experiences? It's in what someone else has done to us, right? In the very fact of giving us space, what instance, a primary hospitality and a primary compassion and a caring, right? And then we lose that. So we spend the rest of our lives, according to psychoanalysis, searching for that which will make us whole, because we were somehow, constituted as subjects through being mutilated, because we lost this absolute unquestioning bond with that which kept us alive. And that is a problem, because people then use other people as objects to make them whole, as opposed to seeing other people as partners in which to experience the eros of human connection. And I don't like this idea at all of the sort of idealized and the real, because I think, we don't ever lose that sense that whomever we love is a ghost figure for the primary object of all of our love, which is the mother, right? And I think we should allow that question of remembering how did love first get implanted in us? And one final point, that Melanie Klein has this wonderful idea, which is that
The psychoanalyst.
the psychoanalyst, that so that the baby's first feeling is to sort of be so agitated and actually in its own aggression towards the world because the world fails it, insufficient feeding, too much feeding, goodness knows what. It then regrets, it becomes aggressive and thinks, oh my God, if I feel aggressive, perhaps this big other could feel really badly aggressive towards me. Oh dear, I'm going to be lovely. I'm going to be so charming. And so we move from the paranoid schizoid prison to the depressive, and the idea of repairing the world, of repairing the objects that we might have shattered or been angry towards or we might have wanted for ourselves. That position produces reparation, and that's what Melanie Klein calls love. So it's a creative move towards the world based in... So I've got these two models. One is the compassion of learning love from that which cares for you in an utterly generous way, and the other is love as reparative. And I think those are both quite interesting things to think about as to what we do when we love somebody.
Well, in many ways, I'm not surprised that however much we've spoken up here, we've missed our way with this large subject, because as someone once remarked to me, you know, the thing about love, it's the most anarchic thing about us, and it's always going to kind of escape. But for now, I'd like to thank Godfrey Barker, Dennis Marks and Grisela Pollock and yourselves for this last hour. Thank you.